What is going on, guys? Eagle Aquatics back here, and it is time to give you guys an update on the RO system. I finally got it all hooked up, running. It's been up and running for a couple weeks. I've done a few water changes on it, and yeah, I'm gonna tell you guys how it's working for me so far, how to set it up, so you guys know how to do everything and how to make your own water station and everything, storage and stuff like that, how to hook all this stuff up. So basically, bought this Aqua FX Barracuda used from a guy on Facebook for a really good price. It came with the filters, but I changed them all. I changed the membrane. This is a 100 gallon per day unit. Got a 100 gallon per day membrane in there. Got the sediment filter here. Got the carbon block, and then I have the RO resin. Now you guys may be wondering, why is that resin orange? You know, I made 40 gallons and this thing turned completely orange. I'm pretty sure it's because of the high, I guess there could be high CO2 levels in my water, but I haven't noticed a change. It still puts out 0 TDS water, or 1 to 2 TDS water. I'm not worried about that. The water I was getting was at 65 TDS, so that's 100 times better. So I'm not too worried about this. I'm not going to waste money on DI resin and fill up every time I have to do a water change, because that's just a big waste of money. If it's still putting out 1, 2, 3 TDS, I'm totally fine with that. So basically, I set this up so I can have a automatic water fill up and a storage tank down there. This is a 32 gallon brute garbage can. There is a float valve in there, and it is currently filling up because I just took out 15 gallons to do a water change. So let me show you guys how this works. So with RO systems, you have to tap into the cold water line. You cannot use hot water, otherwise it will melt these filters. So you get a valve like this connected to your water line, the cold water line, and then there's a compression fitting right here. You put the RO hose in this compression fitting, tight it down all the way. That compresses this so it doesn't leak. And then you follow your hose all the way over here. It leads into the sediment filter. This is the sediment, takes out all the particles in the water and all the impurities and stuff like that. It doesn't really do much for like chlorine or any of that stuff or any chemicals. So this just takes out the solids. And then this leads directly over to the carbon block. Now what the carbon block is used for is the removal of chlorine. Chlorine is more common than chloramines. If you have chloramines, you're going to have to get a second carbon block or some other type of carbon that removes that, because that's more tricky. But I have chlorines, so this carbon block works perfectly. And then this line right here feeds up into this RO membrane right here. So it comes out right here, goes through the RO membrane. This RO membrane pretty much filters out every single thing in the water. Like I literally have 500 TDS going in. Here, let me show you. Alright guys, so I was going to show you the water going into the RO membrane. This is how good it is. So here's a Tds meter. You can't really buy them in stores. You have to more buy them on Amazon.com or something like that. They have cheap ones. They're really cheap, like 10 bucks. And the ones on Amazon have really good reviews, so that's where I bought mine. So as you read, 0 ppm to start. This is water out of the tap. Now I'm on a well, so the TDS is going to be extremely high. So this is directly out of here. So let's read that. It is 383 ppm. My God, that's deadly to fish. No, I'm not too sure, but that's pretty bad. That's pretty high TDS. So that goes through the RO membrane. I swear you guys, it takes it all the way down to 5. So the rule of thumb for RO membranes, if you have a good one, it's supposed to remove 95 to 100% of the TDS from the water. That's how good these things are. And the good thing about these, they're very expensive, but they last for years. You might get 2-3 years out of this, where you only get a few months out of these guys. So that's the good thing about the expensive one. You don't have to replace often. So then the water comes down, boom, into this DI resin. Now the DI resin, the only reason it's here to remove the excess TDS. That 5 ppm TDS coming out of the RO membrane goes into here, and this just eats the rest of that up. And then coming out down to the float valve. Now let me show you guys the final result. Collect a little bit here. Alright guys, there's some water out of the RO unit. Let's measure that TDS. Now it's about 2. It's supposed to be 0 if you have good DI resin. But my DI resin is semi-exhausted because all the CO2 in my water, but I'm still completely fine with 2 ppm. Because overall, if you check this whole vat, or this whole can, it still reads 0. So I'm not worried about that at all. So if you have that problem like me, it's not a huge deal. I'm not going to go waste my money on DI resin if I could get 3 TDS water. It's fine with me. It's way better than what I was getting. And the flow out of the RO system, it is slow, but that's because it's ultra purified, so that's not too bad. The only downside I have with these systems is for every 1 gallon made, it wastes like 2 to 4 gallons. Like that's the wastewater right there. So they do waste a lot of water, but it's not too crazy expensive. Like it won't affect your water bill too much. But you definitely will see an expense. It's kind of worth it to have a really good reef tank though, to have perfect water. And then you got your meter here. Ideally you want this running from like 50 to 80 psi. I'm like right there at 60, 62 maybe. So that's perfect. And if you guys want to do the auto shut off to have this automated, so what that means, when the water reaches the float valve, it shuts the system off. And when you take water off, and when you take water out, the float valve goes down and the system automatically turns on. You'll of course need a float valve, and you'll also need a check valve. So with the check valve, this top one is leading back to the DI. So you're going to need a hose, you're going to need this check valve right here. Make sure it's facing that way. Check valve prevents backflow, just like on an aquarium, those big check valves, so it doesn't overflow anything. And then this is the auto shut off unit. This stuff is very cheap. This is only like $7, and that's like $3. This somehow automatically shuts off the whole system and stops the PSI and everything. I'm not too sure how it works. I just followed some videos on how to set it up on YouTube. But basically the water coming out of the RO membrane goes through this check valve and through the non-inscribed up and down, or in and out side of this auto check off valve with the screws, and then it goes back down to the DI resin. And then the water coming out of the sediment and carbon filters, I have this 3-way right here. One goes to the pressure switch, the other goes to the RO membrane, and this one is coming up from here, going through this and into the RO membrane pretty much, because this line is coming from the carbon filter. If that makes sense, it's kind of confusing, but it's actually pretty easy. That's just how you set it up. I don't know, I just use that as a fail-safe, honestly, so this doesn't overflow, because really, when that float valve goes all the way up, it's going to stop the system, and then you're going to have what's called Tds Creep. That's when high TDS water floods inside of here and doesn't really get filtered out when the unit's off. So when you turn it back on, or when it automatically turns back on, you're going to have a rush of really high TDS water, like 150 ppm or something, go straight to the DI, and it can exhaust your DI resin really fast. So usually I shut the system off once it reaches close to the float valve, or I let it reach the float valve. And then when I turn it back on, I of course turn the water off. I disconnect this hose coming out of the RO membrane. I connect another hose, just a waste hose, and I'll waste the water for the first couple minutes coming out of the RO membrane. Into here, I'll collect it. I'll collect the first sample. It'll read like 200 ppm of TDS, and then like a minute later, you empty that, refill it. It should read like 5 to 10 or something like that. and then you're good to hook it back up and get running again. But that's why I wouldn't go fully automated, because you could get some high TDS in here if your DI resin is already exhausted like mine. Hopefully you guys got something out of that. RO systems are excellent for reef tanks because you get the absolute highest quality water possible. Aqua FX is one of the best on the markets, and this is not too expensive. It runs about $170. I of course did not buy it for that. I bought it used. But that's not too big of a price to pay for the water you get from them. So definitely it's really easy, not too expensive. You could store your water downstairs and you don't have to go to the fish store lugging around jugs of water everywhere, you know. It's just convenient, kind of. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, got something out of it. Maybe you learned how to hook this thing up. Thank you guys for watching. Follow me on Instagram at Eagle Aquatics. Always posting there when I'm not making videos. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.